Hi, my dearest of family. So today we are going to be talking about the upcoming full moon, which is actually a super interesting full moon. It's going to be taking place on the 4th or the 5th of November, depending on where you are. So I will talk about it on a personal level as well as on a global level. So stay till the very end because I'm going to be introducing a couple of asteroids that are playing a major role in this, as well as, of course, I'm going to give you an overview of this full moon's feeling. If you would like to have a personal reading with me, you can do so. You can go on my website, AstroViktor.com. Also, if you would like to study with me, I've got a exciting webinar coming up this weekend on Saturday, and that's going to be all about the balsamic moon phase. So how does that affect your life? What does it really mean to have balsamic moon phase in your chart? If you would like to explore the meaning of that, then check out it on my website also. Now, let me just stop the camera and then I'm going to share the screen so that you can follow the chart and then we can work out together this full moon. So you can see that the full moon is going to be happening on 13 degree of Taurus and it's going to be in an opposition to the sun. That's always the case when we are talking about full moons. The sun and the moon are in opposition. And this is going to be actually a super full moon. This is the second of the year. We're going to have one more later on at the end of the year. And the super full moons pretty much indicates that they are a lot more visible in the sky. They are approximately about a good 30% bigger than a normal full moon. A full moon is a significant astrological event and they represent culminations. Something is getting spotlighted. It's kind of like a heightened awareness of something. So this full moon being on 13 degree of Taurus, this is actually going to fall on the sixth dwad, which is between 12:30 to 14:59 degree of the sign of Taurus. So that's going to be a Libra dwad. So I'm going to be bringing the Taurus and the Libra elements together as well. Basically, we've got quite a double Venusian spotlight here. Taurus is ruled by Venus, but there's the earthly, sensual, value-driven side of Venus. And then we've got the Libra dwad, adds the influence of Venus again, but that's more of an airy, relational, harmony-driven Venusian energy. So the Libra dwad is going to talk to us about love and relationships. The Taurus dwad is going to talk to us about money and personal finances, as well as values and self-worth. And then the Libra element is also bringing in the topics of aesthetics and the desire for beauty or even peace. So a typical Taurus full moon, you know, might be a very personal culmination around what I have, what I value, what does security mean to me. But the Libra what forces a relational component into this picture. A full moon is always an emotional peak. But this emotional peak is not just about my stability. It's about how my stability and values are coming together with a significant other person or just simply with others. Of course, the moon is in tension with the Scorpio sun because it's going to be exactly in opposition. So Taurus, which represents mine, Scorpio says, no, it's ours. So the Libra dwad on the moon side suggests that the key to resolve this tension is fairness, balance, negotiations, seeing the other people's perspective. It does soften the Taurian stubbornness because Libra is more of the sign of diplomacy. So it really feels like that this full moon could manifest as, for example, a culmination or crisis point in a relationship about shared resources, values, or security. It could be a sudden illumination around how to create balance and fairness in financial or romantic partnerships, Or maybe it's a need to make a decision, which is a very deliberate word, to secure your own foundations. And that's the sign of Taurus. It's also bringing in the topic of peace and harmony, but in your physical environment and things that we might be attached to. So it's as if the moon is saying, my security, which is Taurus, is now completely dependent on achieving relational balances. So, like I said, this is a super full moon, the second of the year. And it indicates that it's the closest and the brightest. Actually, this is the closest and the brightest supermoon of the entire year. So, why we have got the moon being on 13 degree, which is on one hand wanting peace, security, and value, but we want to do that in a fair way. And potentially we want to get supported by our partners as well, or by other people. But what's also very interesting in this chart is that this super full moon is actually bang on opposing the true black moon Lilith. So it means that Black Moon Lilith is actually in conjunction to the Sun. And the Sun, which is of course representation of our consciousness and the ego, it is sitting right next to this primal, raw, exiled point of shadow. Because the BML is actually a shadow point. It is a mathematically calculated point. So while the Taurus moon is telling us that we want comfort, we want physical security, we want sensual, stable, predictable peace, I want to hold on to something that is mine. Now, the Scorpio sun and the BMS says, we demand you to look at that raw, untamed truth. We will unearth the secrets, the power plays, the obsessions, the traumas you have buried. We will not let you be comfortable. So that's why this full moon is a little bit more on the intense side because it's kind of like an intense spotlight that is aimed somehow directly at our most primal shadow. Somehow it is forcing us to reflect on our emotions, on our body, on our sense of security. So that Libra, what is going to bring in the relationship culminations. This is almost certainly about a relationship where issues of power, control, sexuality, or shared resources are coming into this direct conflict with your personal need for basically self-worth and stability. This could, BML, Black Moon Lilith, can represent secrets also. And the Scorpio Taurus axis is about money. So secrets about money or shared assets may come to light. Black Moon Lilith is a rebel, and the Taurus moon is the body. So this could be a moment where your own body or instincts rebel against a situation that feels secure but it's actually toxic or too controlling. So there is this demand here to integrate that wild and the taboo to find authentic security rather than that superficial comfort. Now, the dispositor of this full moon is actually Venus, which is on 28 degree of Libra. And it makes a quincunx to Neptune, and it makes a quincunx to Uranus as well. What's very interesting is that Uranus is still on 0 degree of Gemini, but a day later it's going to be shifting back into the sign of Taurus as well. So basically, it is called a Yod configuration. And Venus, after, is going to be moving into Scorpio. It's going to be making a square to Pluto as well. So what really happens is that Venus is almost on an energetic degree. Um, and that is a point of urgency. kind of like a desperation, a last-ditch effort to find balance and make a decision before moving on. And we've got that Queen comes to Neptune. And um, this is kind of like a fated illusion here. There is this deep, uncomfortable pressure to adjust to a dream, a deception, or a spiritual reality that doesn't fit with Venus's desire, which has got a very simple desire. That's all about fair partnerships. So somehow there is this glamour and the reality crisis happening with Venus and Neptune. Imagine this kind of like as a plunge, because Venus is going to be moving into the sign of Scorpio. So she goes from this airy, diplomatic sign, her home sign actually, into her own detriment, a place of obsession, power, and the raw truth. And it's going to be squaring almost immediately Pluto. So that's very much about it's kind of like an out of the frying pan into the fire type of archetype here, really. We had a agonizing indecision with the Libra, Venus, Neptune indications. And then potentially we cannot avoid this decision making anymore. It is an kind of like an unavoidable power struggle. But of course, this Venus is part of this Yod configuration. So Venus is being pointed at by Uranus as well as by Neptune. But we've got the Neptune and Uranus sextile going on, of course. So we call Venus as the focal point, and it would represent certain type of unavoidable adjustments that we have to be making, but it is getting the pressure from both Uranus and Neptune as well. Neptune is the collective spiritual dissolution, the erosion of boundaries, while Uranus is very shocking, sudden, revolutionary change. And in the sign of Taurus, that's going to talk to us about material security and even systems. So it really feels like that this year is talking to us about the old ways of relating and valuing is no longer viable. We must find a new path that integrates that collective chaos and that radical instability. So what's also very interesting is, like I said, Venus moves into Scorpio. It will be making a quincunx to Uranus. It will be squaring Pluto. But Mars is opposing Uranus as well at the same time. So that's a very tight opposition, right? So Uranus in Gemini is a radical, shocking news, technological disruptions, intellectual rebellion, while Mars in Sagittarius is very fiery. It's about fighting for our beliefs. It's about telling the truth. It can represent some legal foreign conflicts as well. It really feels like this is the war of information, full of sudden arguments, explosive revelations. This is basically pretty much of a kind of like a mutable T-square, almost. Um, so what it really feels like is bringing all these energies together, that Uranus-Mars opposition is being funneled directly into Neptune. And somehow there is this total dissolution of truth, a crisis of faith, kind of like a mass confusion, a feeling of being completely overwhelmed by gaslighting or deception. So the bigger picture, there is this emotional peak with the supermoon in Taurus, opposing the sun and the BML. And of course, that's going to be our central theme here. And we've got this background noise happening with the Uranus, Mars, Neptune type of energy, which looks like that it provides a chaotic, confusing, argumentative atmosphere, and the truth is dissolving. And Venus, the ruler of the full moon, is caught somehow in the crosshairs. The Yod makes her the focal point of this fated chaos. She is forced to make a crisis level decision while, while being pressured basically by that Uranus, Neptune, Mars energy. Um, and that's why Venus is falling into a power struggle, because most likely Venus is not kind of like it doesn't know what type of decisions to make. It really feels like that we've got this non-negotiable end to an old way of life, value, or relationship, and it is all happening under kind of like this confusion and conflict. So let's just talk about some possible scenarios that I can imagine with this chart. And let's start with maybe mundane scenarios. I mean, on one hand, this could indicate that there is a cyber event or a major disinformation, for example. Mars, who is all about attacks, and Sagittarius is global media, the truth, opposing Uranus, which represents technology and shock, in the sign of Gemini, which is information and networking. So I can imagine a massive cyber attack on a media outlet, stock exchange, or even government. Or I can imagine this deep, fake, or piece of propaganda so profound it causes immediate international chaos. But no one can prove its origin. That would be Neptune there. It's a crisis where the truth itself is pretty much the victim. Or I can imagine some sudden financial market volatility happening with this as well. Obviously, Taurus Supermoon, which represents money, banks, and security, ruled by Venus, who is at the apex of this yod with Neptune, and Neptune represents illusions and bubbles. And then we've got Uranus being in the picture, which is the crashes. So I can imagine like a market panic, basically. And of course, that is going to lead to certain type of adjustments. Maybe a major currency or a bank faces a crisis or around confidence, for example. With the Venus Neptune Uranus combo, it's all about bursting a bubble. The Venus Uranus quincunx is kind of like an out of the blue, um, like an electronic halt to trading. And Venus-Pluto square follows immediately, so that is somehow suggests a massive power play by, let's say, the central banks. Or I can imagine, because Taurus is a very earthly sign, and I can imagine a certain type of an earthquake, a volcano. I mean, given that Neptune is being in the picture, it could be a tsunami or a major uncontainable event related to oil or gas. The Neptune, the Scorpio element. Obviously, Neptune represents oceans. But let's look at some of the personal scenarios. I mean, this is about the foundation of our lives, and it's being confronted by a truth. Forcing us a total change in our relationships and values. The full moon in Taurus opposes the sun and black moon Lilith, which is about secrets, power, the road, taboo. So there is this long hidden truth here in our partnership that explodes into the open. Most likely this is not a small thing. This is, with Black Monolith being in the picture representing infidelity, financial secrets, or deep-seated sexual problems and incompatibility as well. And somehow that Taurus moon's security is being kind of like under attack. It can feel like it. The dispositor Venus is, of course, being in the sign of Libra, is agonizing. It is somehow forced to make a decision. And having that connection to Neptune, it says we can no longer delude ourselves. Uranus is pushing Venus to break free. So the decision is made, and Venus enters into the sign of Scorpio, squaring Pluto. So it's kind of like, okay, let's divide our assets. It's the final power conversation type of energy. What are we going to do with that? Or imagine the full moon in Taurus, which is a representation of your money and self-worth. There is this ugly truth about your job. Uh, so you might feel like that you are being owned or even undervalued, for example, at work. And you start seeing that shadow side of the company that you work for or the power games that they are playing. And then this Taurus moon is going to be more on the rebel side. My well-being is more valuable and important than any of these. So our Venus comes into the picture. Venus says, I can't do this anymore. Uranus says, you either quit or Neptune says, oh, just go towards your dreams. But that dream might be impractical. And then Venus Pluto is all about, okay, let's negotiate. Let's look at an exit package. Let's come up with a plan B. And you are trying somehow to reclaim your autonomy. Or, the Taurus moon can represent actually your physical body as well, and it's getting highlighted. So I can imagine sudden health issues, let's say the doctors are kind of confused by. Um, and that Venus yod with Neptune maybe shows a non-traditional spiritual or psychological healing. The Uranus quincunx points to needing a radical change in our lives, a new approach to our well-being, because with Uranus we always want to upgrade something. And then in that case, Venus Pluto square can be actually positive because it could be talking to us about commitments, transformation. I'm ready to purge, I'm ready to go on that healing journey. It's about deciding to do that shadow work to go through an element of a healing. However, this could bring some positive, kind of like miraculous diplomatic breakthroughs as well. Maybe we have got these hopeless negotiations going on, and there is that divine intervention somehow here. Maybe that Venus in Libra is going to become the diplomat, the mediator, who is pushing um, this kind of like peace talks. And in that case, Venus and Pluto can help cementing this new power structure. On a personal level, it really feels like that maybe you have been hiding. You have been hiding that raw, primal, authentic self of yourself. And the full moon doesn't bring a bad secret to light. It gives you the courage to share your deepest truth. You kind of come out. You come out as a different person with your true desires, with your past traumatic experiences. And instead of the rejection you feared, maybe you are going to be meeting a total acceptance. And that's the Neptunian energy there. And there is vulnerability in this chart. But that vulnerability, if we are able to kind of reveal it, it's going to create an unshakable security and self-worth. In a relationship, this would talk to us about two souls are kind of like merging and where, telling your partner your biggest secret and that is going to create that more powerful bond ever. But of course, the negative aspect would be an indication that this is not something easy to talk about. Or imagine that, um, with Venus in Libra, we've got this fated encounter in our life. We are meeting this dream, so, like a soulmate, a collaborator. Um, and this could be giving you the liberation you need. This could be giving you a genius idea, for example. This could be bringing you a job offer that seems to come from out of nowhere. Because the full moon in Taurus is tangible, it's about physical manifestations. Or I can even imagine that, you have had a chronic physical issue going on and somehow it is being released. However, this is kind of like crying it all out type of energy. Sometimes crying is a great therapy because you are finally able to let go of a core wound within yourself. What's going to do that to you? It's going to ground you, and then you are going to be able to find that peace. Remember, this Taurus full moon is on a Libra dwad, which is one of the signs um, connected to peace. And I think the outcome would be that you are going to start feeling better. You are reborn into your own skin. So this would be the full moon, very briefly, or at least how I see it. To summarize on this full moon wants to illuminate something that has been in the shadow. Maybe it's for a very long time. Maybe with that Libra dwad, maybe why it's popping up here is because you have been doing everything for others, but you have forgotten about your own, self-care. We've got, a fixed um, modality here, which is all about avoiding the change, resisting the change. So you might be resisting to see the truth. And that's why we have got that Black Moon, Lilith, and Sun conjunction there, because that's going to be forcing you to see the truth behind something. Or, that we have to be able to deepen our bonds with others. Maybe this is also about because that Taurus, which is self-worth, and then the Libra, the sign of validation, that you have been wanting to receive the validations from others. And that's why you have been kind of like a people pleaser. This, maybe you have been, with that Venus, Uranus, quincunx, for example, or Venus, Neptune, quincunx. Quincunxes can be draining our body as well. So what it also can indicate is that, something that has been dragging you down and then you feel a little bit burnt out, draining you completely, and then you feel kind of like powerless. I think then in that case, Venus and Pluto square is actually a blessing because you're gonna find your own power again. Maybe someone has been giving you kind of like the wrong idea about security, or maybe they are even promising things to you with that Neptune, and it might not be delivered, and it can lead to disappointment as well. So it really feels like that this full moon is telling you what type of changes you need to make in your life. And obviously, it's going to start within. That inner stability needs to be re-established somehow. Because the moon is also the representation of our memories. And of course, Taurus is something to do with the foundation. So maybe we need to go back down on a memory lane and remember when we felt the best the very last time. But it's really much about going within. That's how it feels like with this full moon. I think this is an incredibly powerful full moon. This is the brightest and the biggest of the year. Not to mention that the following day, even though Mercury is not necessarily connected to it, but Mercury is going to go, not the following day, sorry, but in the next few days, it's going to go retrograde, and that would be also the representation of certain type of reflection. And for me, this full moon is a little bit about the reflection. It's potentially giving us fresh perspectives as well about what we are meant to be doing as a next step in our life. So, guys, this is my interpretation on the upcoming full moon. I hope it helps. And if it did so, please press like, follow the channel, and see you next time in my next video. Bye bye.